Hey there, Cube Nation. Sorry about the delay. We had some technical difficulties as we were trying to also connect to Facebook and Instagram. Unfortunately, those feeds may not actually work out, so we'll keep working on it. But in the meantime, we'll continue here on YouTube. Today, we're talking about rehydrating the food that you've freeze dried in the Cube freeze dryer and how easy it is. But we get a lot of questions asking us to show, how do I rehydrate it? How do I know how much water to put into it? How do I even use the food that I've dried? It's pretty easy when you're drying things like strawberries. We all know they taste really well. We all know that they are good as a snack when they're dry. And honestly, most of the time, I don't actually rehydrate them, except for when I'm doing things like oatmeal or other cereals. I'll just dump it in and it rehydrates in the cereal that I'm eating. Same thing with other berries. I got a whole bunch of blackberries from a friend the other day and dried them, and I love just dropping them down in my Cheerios, pouring the milk over it, and they rehydrate in the cereal. So those things are easy, right? Well, today we're going to talk about some of the things that aren't quite as easy or that maybe you haven't thought of yet. Today, obviously our topic is about rehydrating. So if you want to post in the comments any questions that you have along the way or suggestions, we'll try and address them as they come through. And also, if you have questions or comments or concerns on some other things that aren't related to today's topic, give us a call. Go visit us on our website at p4lfood.com. Find out how to reach us, and we'll address those concerns and questions directly with you. Today, let's talk about rehydrating. One of the things that we did earlier this year is we attended the International Pizza Expo to display the Cube freeze dryer. Interestingly, we went with a whole bunch of herbs that we had dried in the Cube just so that we could show all the people at the Pizza Expo what it was like to have real herbs freeze dried in your own home, in your own restaurant, without all the fillers that come through commercial packers, right? And we had a hard time keeping these jars there so that people could smell them and taste them. Everybody wanted to walk away with them, and they kept saying, these are the best herbs in the whole trade show. And we were there with people from all over the world showing their herbs, their sauces, things like that. And everybody loved what we had. And they were just straight herbs that we had dried ourselves. It just goes to show you all the fillers that happen in the foods that you buy at the store. That's one of the great things about the Cube, is that you can do these things in your own home or your own restaurant even, and you don't have to worry about what's coming with them. But what we also did is we freeze dried pizza sauce ahead of time, and we allowed people to rehydrate them. So I'm going to put some in a bowl here and show you what it's like. We can change our view to be down on the table. There you go. So you can see here where it's just pizza sauce. And it's all just a powder like this. I'm going to dump a little bit of water in here, show you what happens to it. Try not to make too much of a mess. I can smell it already. just mix this up here. You can see up close. You can make it as thick or as thin as you want. But after it's done rehydrating, just like this, it tastes just like it did before. This was one that was really easy because we just put the sauce in the trays, in the cube, dried it, and it turned into this powder. All I did is added some water to it. And we love doing this at our home because then we can have our own custom homemade pizza sauce, but stored on the shelf. So when we went to the Pizza Expo, part of what we were doing there was also showing restaurant owners and things that they could have their own pizza sauce and sell it in jars that was shelf stable, so that they didn't have to worry about all the commercial packing of it and all of that, those things that come along with it. Instead, if they want to, they can share their special recipe of pizza sauce with the world, and they didn't have to worry about trying to put it in cans and bottle it so much, as they could just do it in their own stores. But in your own home, it makes a big difference when you can just do it and reconstitute it later. This pizza sauce was dried, about 8-9 months ago, and it's just sat on the shelf, sealed, until now when we did this. So as you start to think about what do you use the cube for, aside from the apples that just came on in the last month, and all the peaches that just came on, at least in our area, in the last month, then those are easy. You know how to freeze dry those. We've been doing things like that for a long time in dehydrators and whatnot. But what about sauces? If you were to take, say, chicken broth and do the same thing, freeze dry it in the cube, now you have a chicken broth that maybe you've put your own herbs in, like this, or maybe you put your own spices in, your own blend, all of those things. And then we can freeze dry it and use it later. Here in just a minute, I'm going to show you how we're going to rehydrate ground beef, but in a broth instead of just water, to add more flavor to it. As we're talking about this and different ingredients, one of the things that I love to have in my house is garlic. So I just crushed up garlic. Actually, I ran it through a food processor, so it was small, and then dried it in the cube. Now I have garlic that was fresh, just dried, that I can use in anything. In fact, I'm going to put it in our ground beef today, and my lunch that I'm going to show you how we're making today. I've got a team that's making sure I pay attention to your questions and comments, so I'll look at my phone periodically as we go. I have here a meal that we made at our house. It is Jamaican jerk chicken with black beans that I dried, and I wrote on this bag and everything that it needed 6 ounces of water. So I'm going to show you here what it looks like dry, and then we'll put water in it. And this meal we actually made all together and then freeze dried it later. So I preheated a bunch of water here in my tea kettle. 6 ounces is 3/4 of a cup. I'll just measure it out here. Dump the water in. And then I've got this bowl that I brought in specifically for this, because now I'm going to cover it so that the heat stays in. By the way, the hotter the water, the better it rehydrates. So I'm just going to seal this and set it aside for just a moment. And you'll be able to see it. One of the things that I love about the Cube home freeze dryer is that I can put meals in, and as long as they're like foods, I don't put blackberries in with onions, and I don't put strawberries in with garlic, things like that, because they take on the flavor of each other. But if I have similar meals, for example, that I've saved from leftovers, that's all this Jamaican jerk chicken is leftover from a meal that we actually had. And I just put it on a tray and froze it, and then I came back to it. Now, this one was actually 2 years old. So it'll be the first time I've opened it and tried it actually since that point. I've had some of it since then. But that's part of the point. We don't throw away food at our house. If we have leftovers, it goes in the Cube. We don't ever just fill our garbage can with the leftovers, or even fill our refrigerator with things that we throw away a week later. Almost all of our leftovers end up going in the Cube. So that my home food storage actually is full of all things that we know we already like to eat. Now, if we have Brussels sprouts at our house, they go into the garbage before I even eat them. They never make it into the freeze dryer. No, that's not true. The rest of my family likes Brussels sprouts, just not me. But that's the glory of it, is that they also can store food, and they can have things that they like also. I just got a notice here. Somebody typed in that they freeze dry all their pasta sauces and broths, and they love how easy they are to rehydrate and use with everyday meals. That's absolutely true. One thing I forgot to tell you, this pizza sauce actually was more of an experiment just to show people at the trade show. It was a generic pizza sauce that we got out of a tin can at a grocery store. We freeze dried it, and we started sharing it with people, and they would taste it and go, "Oh, this is the best pizza sauce here in the show." We just kind of chuckled inside and didn't tell anybody where it came from. They wanted our recipe. We told them we can't share it, all of these things. But the important thing to note is that they loved the flavor of it, and they thought it was the best on the whole show floor. Any sauces, any of your broths that you have, any of the meltings off of I know people make a lot of dog food, and so they'll boil down all of the bones out of the meat, set aside the meat for dog food, but all the broth that's left, freeze dry it and use it in your everyday meals. Add a little garlic, some herbs, whatever you want, freeze dry it, and it tastes the same when it comes back out. So thank you for that comment. That is important to note. The Cube is not just for food storage to go into your bunker under your house. It's for everyday food use. And that's one of the things that we want to try and help everybody learn and understand. You can use what you have freeze dried every day. That's why the Cube runs basically 24/7 at my house because we're freeze drying all of these ingredients and things that we then use in our daily meals. I'm going to check on our Jamaican jerk chicken. So you can see there's a little bit of water left over there, but it's doing good at rehydrating. I'm going to stir it just a moment. I'm going to cover it again so we don't let all the heat out. Again, the hot water works best. While it's rehydrating, I'm going to set it aside. And I am going to start another one so that you can see this is a loaded baked potato soup. I'm just doing a variety here of things so that you can see what they look like. This is one of our favorite meals, especially this time of year as it starts to get cold. Baked potato soup with bacon and some other ingredients. I actually don't know the recipe. My wife would know it better than me. So this one required 8 ounces of water, and I'm going to talk about how you know that in just a moment, as soon as I put water in it. All right, I'm going to break it up, stir it in. Right now it's pretty watery, but as the potatoes rehydrate and the broth in there, they'll get looking better. I'm going to cover it here pretty fast, keep it warm. Now, one of the things that you can do in this is that you can just dump all of these ingredients into a little pot. Pour the water in it, put it on your stove, and just heat it there. Put a lid on it, and then it rehydrates really fast. It's 2 or 3 minutes, and you've suddenly got a meal. One of the people that work here with us, they freeze dry meals all the time. In fact, they're doing it so often they bring it into our office to use the extra freeze dryers or as we're testing them. And they tell us stories all the time about they've got to the end of the day and they're tired, they don't want to make a meal, so they just tell their family, all right, tonight you get to choose. And their kids are excited, they run down to their pantry and they have all these bags, they're pulling them out, and they choose either a soup or chili or a chicken dish, something rice or pasta, all of this, and they just heat up water, rehydrate all of them, and they sit around the table all eating their favorite dish, all different, and they love doing it. That's one of the great things about the cube also, is it gives you so much versatility in what you're storing. Some of my kids, as they were growing up, as you all well know, they didn't all like the same foods. And so having the cube allows us to freeze dry meals that we know they're going to like, even if it's not the same as their brother and their sister. So for just a moment, while we're waiting for these other meals, let's talk about how you know how much water to put back into it. And later in the show notes, we're going to put a paper in there, PDF document probably, where you can go and find the formula that we have figured out. But we're going to explain it right now. The very first thing you do when you put the food on the trays that go in the cube is you weigh it. And I suggest weighing it in grams. So weigh it in grams. Weigh an empty tray so you know how much it is also. By the way, it's about 675 grams, the tray plus a silicone mat. I always freeze dry on a silicone mat. So you weigh it, write it down, and then let's say it's 1,300 grams on a tray. After it's done, you pull it out and you weigh it immediately. Now it might be 900 grams. The difference between the 900 grams and the 1,300 grams is the water. So there's 400 grams of water that got pulled out of the food. And as you look at the calculation later when we put it in the show notes, we'll show you how we've figured out to calculate then remove the tray weight. So then in that case, you only have 225 grams of dry food. And you can break it up into meals. A typical meal is anywhere from 55 to 70 grams of food. So you can figure out then by ratio how much water to put it back into it. And we'll even put in there how to convert grams of water to ounces, because it's a lot easier for us to figure out how many ounces, fluid ounces of water to put in. For example, 8 ounces of water is 1 cup. Just so you know, every fluid ounce of water is approximately 29 grams. And again, we'll put that in the notes later so that you can come find that. That's how I knew in my meals that when I wanted to rehydrate the Jamaican jerk chicken later, that I was going to need 6 ounces of water for the meal that this was. Let's take a look at it. Look at that. It's too bad you guys can't smell it, because it smells so good. In fact, I'm going to give it a taste here and see what it's like. Oh wow. It is still just as good, and now just as moist as it was when we first had it. I might end the broadcast here and just finish eating it because it's so good. I'll have one of the black beans. All the flavor that was in the Jamaican jerk chicken is still here. It's back again. If I keep eating, then I'm not going to actually be hungry for my food. Let's check on our baked potato soup. Look at how well that's come together. Oh, that looks so good. I'm going to try that. Bit of potato. I'm going to find a big piece of potato, because that's one of the things, right? You have big pieces of food and you're always worried, is it dry, number one, when it came out of the freeze dryer, and number two, when you rehydrate it, is it all the way rehydrated? Let's find out. Again, another really good meal that I might just sit here and eat. But the potatoes were totally rehydrated. The centers of them weren't dry. And a lot of that has to do with the heat of the water and knowing how much to put in it. Obviously, you don't want to water down your food. You don't want it to taste bad when you redo it. Now, we're going a little longer than we thought. We were going to go 30 minutes, but we're going to beg our team, can we have 15 more minutes? All right. They're going to give us a little more time because I still want to show you one of my favorite parts. But let's do our ground beef. Always remember with meat you definitely want oxygen absorbers so that the animal fats don't just go rancid. So I've got this ground beef here, and let me break it apart just a little bit. The thing with meat is that you can't over rehydrate them. So I'm not actually going to measure out the water. I'm just going to dump it in. But one of the tricks that I have here is that I have this bouillon sauce that I actually bought. I love it, and I've not been able to recreate it by myself. So I'm just going to stir it into the beef here. I think I needed a bigger bowl. But one of the things that you can see is that the water is disappearing rapidly. So we need some more water. Even if there's excess water left at the end of this, it's okay, because the meat will only absorb as much water as it needs. And then just for fun, remember that garlic that I told you about? I'm going to throw in a couple of pieces. Oh wow, that's strong smelling. I'm going to break it apart, put it in with the garlic and the bouillon broth. And you can see me just soak in the water. Now, in preparation for this particular class that we're doing today, I decided to reconstitute beef just like this. And I don't know if any of you have ever tried having what we call walking tacos. If not, here's what a walking taco basically is. You get one of those small serving size bags of Fritos or Doritos of your choice. You take ground beef and sour cream if you want it, salsa, chopped tomatoes, maybe some onions, and you put them in the bag. And then you crunch it all up so the chips get into small pieces. And then you can just sit and eat straight out of the chip bag. And it's like this taco that you can walk around with. That's why we call it walking tacos. I don't know if anybody else does. But I did this meal as a preparation for what we're going to do today. The chopped tomatoes were freeze-dried. The sour cream was freeze-dried. The salsa wasn't freeze-dried, but I have freeze-dried salsa before. In fact, the same recipe that we used. The ground beef was freeze-dried, and no, the Fritos were not freeze-dried. But I reconstituted all of that just to go in the walking tacos, and nobody knew the difference. So later when they were eating it, they wouldn't have known. In fact, they asked which of the things were freeze-dried and which weren't, because they couldn't tell. Then when I told them, they're like, oh, yeah, maybe no, you can't tell. They just thought they could. All right, let's give the ground beef a taste here. Again, I'm going to get a big piece. So because it was absorbing the bouillon and the garlic, it tastes like a seasoned ground beef, and it wasn't seasoned before. It's just the rehydration process that made it be that way. All right. The final thing we're going to do here, let me check to make sure I'm not missing anything. I just had a comment. Somebody said, I like that I can adjust how thick a soup or sauce is in a case-by-case basis. I add a little less water to make a sauce thicker, or more if I want it thinner. Right? It's so easy, and it's stuff that you already liked before. We could make this pizza sauce thinner to do more like a California style pizza, or thick for a Detroit style. That's more my style of pizza. Okay, one of the things I brought with me today are freeze-dried tomatoes. Here, I'll show them to you. They're just in slices. I'm going to pull it out. But one of the things I learned so well is I love grilled cheese sandwiches with tomatoes on them. But most of the time, I try and do it, and I don't have a fresh tomato lying around because they only last for a few days in the refrigerator, as you know. But in this case, I'm not going to rehydrate the tomatoes in water. I'm going to do a little prep work here of, because I love having my bread toasted a little bit with butter. The butter side will go down for now. Start heating my stove up. I was a little worried that the butter wouldn't be soft enough to spread, but all these lights on, it's plenty warm. All right, I am going to put on now a slice of cheese, just cheddar today, and then I'm going to take one of these tomato slices. Now, I want you to see what they're like here. They're just brittle and they break apart. I'm going to put it right in the middle there. I'm going to let it grill here on the stove. And I'll turn it as we need to. But while it's doing it, let's talk about some of the other foods that we can rehydrate. We can reconstitute while we're watching this happen. We want to make sure that the cheese gets to that point where it just stretches, you know. All right, so let's talk about some of these things. Could I have dehydrated a slice of ham to put on it? Absolutely. Just drop the ham in a bowl of water ahead of time for a few minutes, and it will come out just like it was before. So now you have a hot ham and cheese sandwich. What about turkey slices? Those as well. What about those who are a little more crazy than me, and they like to do things like zucchini, thinly sliced zucchini on a sandwich like this? Could you do the same? Absolutely. In fact, you could rehydrate zucchini in a broth, and it would take on that same flavor. As one of the ingredients that I forgot to tell you about in our walking tacos was corn. I freeze-dried a whole bunch of corn, but in this case, I actually rehydrated it in this same broth that I just showed you that I'm doing with my, watch, I'm going to burn my sandwich. Yeah, there we go. little toasty. Turn the heat down so I can get the cheese melted. The corn I rehydrated in the same broth that I just showed you that I did the taco meat in. So now it took on the flavor of that broth with the garlic, and I actually added some, I don't have any, some of the herbs that I had used. So now that corn took on the flavor of that. It was amazing. It was really, really hot. So I'm going to have to keep on top of it. We'll give it just one more moment. But let me show you something that I did just recently and actually made a video of it and send it out on our YouTube channel, and that is paprika. I didn't know this until a little bit ago as I started researching and found out that paprika is just dried pepper ground up, as in like a red pepper. Most of the time it's Sorrento, or even throw in hotter red peppers depending on what kind of flavor you want. In this case, I did red bell peppers and smoked them. Go find it on our YouTube channel. It's a couple weeks ago, I think, that we posted it, and you can see how it happened. But now I have 4 jars just like this. Came out of 12 red bell peppers that I smoked, and that's all I did to it. And then I ground it up, and I've got this paprika that now I've used on potato salad and deviled eggs and other things. And it's a paprika that I love now to use as a sweet and smoky flavor. I could have used serrano peppers and gotten a little bit of heat in it. But the best part is, now I know that I have paprika that doesn't have any sawdust in it. I don't know if you knew that, but a lot of the herbs and the spices that we buy at the store, they actually have fillers like sawdust. And they do that to fill space. There are also things to help it stop from clumping and whatnot, but you can put a little bit of salt in here as well. That helps with some of the moisture. I didn't know some of that stuff, but I learned it and made our own paprika. The other thing that I did, let me make sure and turn my sandwich. Oh, it's looking pretty good here. The other thing that I did is we had a whole bunch of apricots that a neighbor gave us. I dried the apricots and I ground it up just like I did the peppers. So I have this apricot powder that I use now, and I sprinkle on chicken right before I grill it. Have you ever had apricot flavored chicken? It's really good. You should try it. And you can do the same with oranges and peaches and tomatoes, pizza sauce. One of the things we found out is tater tots sprinkled with this pizza sauce powder. Oh, that was a hit. Well, let me show you. Now I'm going to shut off my stove here. Try not to burn myself, even though I burned my sandwich. I'm not very happy about that. Check that out. I'm going to see if I can tear it apart. And the tomato reconstituted in the cheese. Have you ever had a tomato reconstituted with cheese? There is very few things on earth that you will experience as well as that. All right, now that I've made all this food, I'm really hungry. It's time for me to eat lunch. So remember, use the cube. One of the things I feel most sad about is when I hear that people bought the cube and they use it great in July, August, September, and then their trees and their garden stop producing. This is everywhere north of Texas. We know that you have 2 seasons, but and then their cube sits there unused for 9 months. And I think you've missed 9 months of some of the best things to use your freeze dryer for. We didn't have time today, but perhaps next time or a video I'll show you about freeze drying and reconstituting peach cobbler. Yes, it worked. Didn't fail like our apple pie filling that we did a month or so ago. Cube Nation, make sure that you use the cube. Use it every day. Find out all of the things that will change how you eat food every day, whether it's your pastas, your sauces, your ground beefs, your veggies, your fruits, all of it. And don't forget the candy too. We're going to do another one of these on candy. Cube Nation, it's been nice being with you today. We're going to keep doing this, so stay tuned and chime in with us next time. Thanks. Have a great day. Just push stop streaming. That should. You're all going to see this, and we'll get better at this as we go.